Hello humans, Still the 20th of July. Let me shut things up here. It was a little hot for a moment. We've had, it's 20th of July. It's about 11:45, heading outbound. Got the chores done. Very few shortages today, so that was good. And a lot of the tourist traffic is wound down temporarily. It'll pick up again as we get into August, but there's this like big flurry around the 4th of July, which really drains all of the surrounding towns of all of the supplies, and then it'll gradually fill back up again. Anyway, heading outbound to the coast, and I'm going to discuss my little data gathering, right? And the immediacy values, because that's the only thing we can trust. Immediacy values, because of the way that the language hooks the emotion for immediacy tighter, albeit for a shorter period, than either mid-term or long-term language, it's reasonably trustworthy, and it is difficult to do a lot of censoring. So immediacy language can be thought of as a lot of slang, and while they'll attempt to censor slang, it's not as important to them as long-term words like treason, criminal, that kind of thing, right? So the shorter, the mid-term language is the most heavily censored outside of the very long-term legal language. They censor a lot of that kind of stuff. In any event, though, the very prescient immediacy language is still available because it's picked up in the kids forums and gaming forums, all of these kind of places, right? Places where you're not usually going to find a preponderance of discussions about the heavy news topic of the day that they need to really worry about censoring. So the censorship industry, it's got huge holes. If you look at it from a linguistic viewpoint, they have the wrong idea on how to go about this. In any event, though, so I've got a fair amount of immediacy values, immediacy data. I had to rerun a couple of routines, which is why I'm a little bit later in dealing with this than I wanted to. And it kind of impacted some of the other stuff because I've gotten really whipped up and very much involved in finding hidden technological literature, space alien literature, hidden in our own literary history, which was the subject of the talk on the way inland. So now we're on the way outland, and we're going to talk about the future. So today is a peak of a near-term peak that had been forecast for a couple of months of emotion, both building and release. And this is it's odd to have peaks of both of those. I believe that the peak aspect of the emotions now is due to Trump saying he's going to be arrested, that they're actually going to put him into, confinement somewhere, and they're going to try and prevent him from running for president by saying that they are going to convict him of insurrection, which means if you're convicted of insurrection, you can't hold federal office, which makes sense, right? And so they're going to try and do that. It's not going to work. It's a bunch of hoo-ha. They're building the language up, trying to gen up an emotional wave to support them in this. That's not working. And it's quite evident within the data that that's not going to happen. But the emotional values of this language coming out at this point suggest that we may have activity today or tomorrow relative to something big, something splashy, that the deep state's going to try and engineer to capture the news cycle, et cetera, right? Even though they've lost it, and you can't capture a news cycle when you've got, 250,000 outlets for that news not involved in the mainstream. So they can only work centralized. They can't do shit against decentralization. That's showing up in our data sets. So this could be like a decentralized Uber alles, okay? So decentralized over all. This is a period of time that the data sets are forecasting a lot of immediacy value action relative to the inability of the state, the deep state, the Khazarian mafia, to control decentralized activity. And this is going to be evident over these next 2 months or so. So the data sets have us in a peculiar window. Part of this window is these last 10, 11 days of this month and the first couple of days of August. This like 2-week period, Thursday through Thursday, right? And so the economic aspects of what's going down now are going to be echoed very, very, very fiercely in September. And they're going to start being echoed in September after I want to say the 15th for sure, but maybe as early as the 13th, because there's indications of that in how the emotional waves are proceeding through August and September, at least insofar as the forecast here. So it might be as early as the 13th, but for pretty sure from the 15th onward. And so that would be the last 2 weeks of September, and then all through October, and all through November, and then that's as far as I trust my data, right? It still seems to indicate that we're in this same level of emotional stew, the same elements of emotional stew economically, all of the same kinds of incidents and pressures and so on that are going to be first get our attention over these next 10 days, and then will re-echo for us in the last 2 weeks of September and then all of October and all of November. It suggests that those will still be continuing into December and thus may even continue into January, February, and onward. But I don't trust my data beyond the immediacy data, okay? So I'm just not going to get too ahead of ourselves, right? Because the immediacy data is working out really well, but the long term and so on, as I say, they're just censoring the fuck out of everything. Really good cup of coffee today. Anyway, so we can expect that the economic pressures will be driving deep state Khazarian mafia activities in the public over the rest of summer and all through fall. The economic activities that will be driving the deep state will not necessarily yield a response in the financial or economic realm. So I fully expect that there's going to come a crisis. It'll probably happen before the halfway mark in August. So before the 15th of August, there will be a crisis build up in the economy, in the financial stuff, at a level that I'm certain there'll be hints if you follow that kind of thing, but you're probably going to have to really suss it out. But it'll happen at a level that will hit the deep state to such an extent that they will have to respond. Now, here's where it gets real interesting. There's hints in the data that the deep state and the Khazarian mafia are going to have a split. Okay, that there's going to be a point of internal contention that will be reached within this background activity that will show up for us in the latter half of August. And when it does, it should be accompanied by space alien releases, information releases at a very, very, very significant level. Like, not bullshit, like, we're not fucking around here, guys. Here's the actual paperwork. Slap it down on the table and have a look at this piece of equipment I've got a photo of here that we can't figure out what the fuck this thing does, right? that kind of thing, like really getting gritty about it. And that should come out from the deep state. And this could have caused the Khazarian mafia all kinds of problems. And the suggestions are in the data that they're not all for this, that they're not part of this release, that the schism appears from that point forward and becomes wider as we go forward and more visible. And we should see that visibility sometime in our September problems, right? So the economics are going to be what drives it, but they won't have an economic out. So they won't have a way to capture the news cycle and stay within the thematic level of the crises that cause them to need to do this. So there will be an economic crisis that will be, from their viewpoint, so severe, so frightening, that they'll have to do something. They're going to have to figure that they're going to have to stomp the news cycle and totally control it so nobody talks about any other fucking thing than what they shovel out, because they can't have you talking about whatever the fuck it is that happens before the 15th of August in the background in our financial system. It could be bonds. That would seem to me just from an analytical viewpoint, a major crisis in the ability of the U.S. Treasury and the Fed to deal with bonds somehow could force the deep state to take this very drastic move. Remember, they can't go back once they do that. They can never undo it once they do it. And then they can only do it once. Right? They can only grab the attention once. Thereafter, anything that comes out about the space aliens may hype it and so on, but it won't be as impacting as that very first official gritty release kind of a deal, right? Up to the point of saying, okay, they're here now and they're invading. That'll get everybody's attention, right? But up to that point, the second release of information, third and so on, is going to have various fading out levels of impact on the social order, especially relative to the ability of the deep state to continue control. So there's weird stuff in this data sets. Probably some of it's influenced by the idea that Hollywood is shutting down and going on strike and stuff, but it would seem to indicate, some of the forecast would seem to indicate that we're going to have late night talk show hosts get arrested, that kind of thing. I mean, something out of the blue, something unexpected, something that's going to be impacting of at least that portion of the public that pays attention to those things. And it's going to be something that the deep state and more the Khazarian mafia, because they're in charge of the comms at that level, the face of it all, is going to really have to react to. So we get an impression from the data sets of a couple of things occurring, something in reality, like one of these guys, maybe it's a DUI or something, right? Just something out of the blue, something unexpected, that a late night talk show host gets his name in the news in a way that he doesn't want, and that would that's going to have to require the Khazarian mafia to run cover, right, to run backfill, that kind of a thing. And so we'll see that develop. That's one of my temporal markers, is this whatever, right? It may not be an arrest. It's going to be something that gets the idea of the late night talk shows as a group into the public mind in a very negative aspect. And it's going to come on up as a temporal marker in the foreground in August, and it's associated with the same set as the financial stuff, and it is associated that way because this particular point in time brings us to this major split between the global deep state and the Khazarian mafia. And so we have a descriptor set that would indicate that a result, so not the only and not the first necessarily, but a result of this schism that starts appearing between the Khazarian mafia and the deep state is going to be a fracturing of the deep state itself. And so there are hints in the data sets that as we go into September and October, we're going to get a period, or enter the period where there's the rats pointing at each other saying, he did it, you know. They're going to use the Saudi defense, right? Some other dude did it. And so we may see that, you know, like if I had to say, I would say it'd be the Dutch, okay? So we might see a situation where the Dutch people get out in force with the farmers, and the police join them, and they go and they take over and throw everybody out of the Dutch military, and then throw everybody out of the government, including all of the senior workers and so on, and dismantle that deep state in their action, and impede the relationships of the other aspects of the deep state's global infrastructure, such that certain portions of that deep state infrastructure start becoming visible as they are becoming unglued, separated from the deep state itself. So once the Dutch take over their government and start throwing all these people out, start arresting others, and start releasing information, it starts causing fracturing. It starts causing cover your ass defense kind of shit from other parts of the deep state throughout Europe and throughout America and so on, right? And it's a sign of the success that we're all having in terms of eroding this, but it's also a sign of this. It's sort of like a threshold, right? Once this occurs, once the deep state reaches these points where we get into this level of contention between them and the Khazarian mafia, and then that takes a certain pressure and cohesiveness off, and then the deep state starts fracturing and fighting among themselves. Very much like the leader of a gang gets taken out, then if you got two strong number twos, there's going to be a fight, right? And so we end up with internal fights in the deep state, which reveals all kinds of stuff and aids the overall corrosion of that deep state in each and every one of the individual countries that it occupies. So we'll see this effect emerge over August and continue and be reinforced September, October, and November. Such that this is going to be a very, very, very entertaining late summer, fall, and early winter for all of us guys on the sideline with our popcorn, watching it all unravel. We're also going to get, as a result of this, a whole new cadre of deep state players. Okay, so we'll see. We will come to see people both within the deep state and those that are fighting it be exposed by their actions as a result of the deep state having to respond to whatever the hell this financial thing is over the first half of August. I'm of the opinion, because of the way the language lays out, because of these old data sets that go back into 1997, that have been consistently accurate and consistently building, that the deep state is going to find itself in a position where someone's going to make the decision to do the UFO release. And in my opinion, we will look back several years from now and say, aha, that's the point at which they could not recover. And maybe they should have held off on the UFO release for months, right? Held it off as long as they could. Their problem, though, relative to that, is that there's all kinds of pressures building against the deep state on all fronts, including the UFO front. And so you got a lot of us woo guys out there pushing them on all of their UFO shit, because we know how critical it is to everything else, and we know how central it is to everything else. And as I started saying initially with this little discussion here, they can't handle decentralization. So the minute that the UFO stuff is taken out of the hands of the Khazarian mafia and it's starting to be opened up, we enter into our truly decentralized world. And it's not 100% complete then, obviously. There's many years to go. There's tons of stuff to come out. Lots of the war yet to be fought before victory should be declared. But we're on the path to victory, and this would be a very, very, very large temporal marker to have a level of gritty kind of factual, practical release of UFO information. And then we'll all know it's because they're so desperate because of whatever the fuck is happening to the financial stuff. And in August, we will have a good indicator. September is going to just be, slap you upside the face and kick you in the balls relative to finances. Not necessarily a big drop in the stock market. No crashes are indicated that way. I'm not really trusting any financial data at all that comes through on my stuff. All of those sets are 100% suspect of being controlled and manipulated beyond the ability to tease any accurate information from them. Simply because the Khazarian Mafia is just so desperate around finances now. Bear in mind, all they have is a central bank, debt, and lies. Okay, so Khazarian Mafia doesn't own any armies. They don't have any, storehouse of stuff they don't have any space alien technology to unleash on you. None of this shit. The Khazarian Mafia has banks, debt, and the illusion of control that stems from the banks and the debt. Once the space alien information is even hinted at, we've already had some hints saying, oh yeah, this is real and so on, but we haven't quite crossed this conceptual threshold resulting in a very specific kind of change that I'm looking for in the language. We're getting close to it. I know we're building towards it. I think we'll probably reach that point in the latter half of August, which would be ever so satisfying because the very first time I did these data runs back in 1997, it showed that it would be late August when we would have a UFO disclosure, okay, where the deep state would be forced to cough up actual information and they couldn't lie much about it anymore. And thereafter, everything changed. And so this has been pending since 1997. I suspect that we're here now, that we're at that point in our reality that this is going to come out. Everything seems to be pointing that way. It could hold off and we might have some level of UFO disclosure stuff pushing into September as the first point on it, but it sure looks like August. We'll see. We'll see how it lays out or how it manifests. I'm not particularly worried at a personal level about the World War III stuff and all of that kind of thing, right? About the bogus, we stand with Ukraine all the way through to World War III kind of shit coming out of the criminals that run the country. I'm not worried about that so much at the moment because we've crossed some significant thresholds in terms of support for them eroding away. They will try it, probably. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think we'll be lobbing nukes at Russia and vice versa. I do think we're going to see some rather dramatic war stuff, right? The data sets are indicating that, Ukraine is lost and all of this kind of stuff, and it's all really a hoax to continue to bleed the public, bleed the military, et cetera, et cetera. But now bear in mind, all of these things are gifts to the military-industrial complex. And that's where it's all going to get really tricky as we go into August after our 2 weeks of whatever the hell in the background kind of financial thing. So the military-industrial complex, the deep state subcontractors that make their money off of replenishing the war materials, all of that shit's going to hit a big stumbling block here. Okay, so we'll come into August after the financial stuff of these next 2 weeks in the background, and then the first 15 days of August, whatever the fuck that is in the background. During that period of time, it's going to start coming out that our military-industrial complex is not up to grade. That is, they can get as much money as we want to give them, but they're not going to be able to recreate all the weapons that have been destroyed in trying to support Ukraine. And so this is going to cause something of a political crisis on its own that's going to affect, well, basically everything. Okay, so we'll have some major political changes as a result of this. All right, so it may be that we have new laws proposed or something like that, but there will also be factual changes on the ground in terms of stuff being done. That we should see visible by the end of August, and that these signs are really the corporate military control or corporate subcontractor controlled hidden UFO shit deep state having to react to crises on all kinds of fronts that they were not prepared to deal with. This is why I'm of the opinion that there's more pressure on the system now and on the players within the system to do a UFO release now this year than we've seen in the past, and it's going to be because of a confluence of events, because the Khazarians have lost the media. They don't control the narrative anymore. They're going to desperately try and recover it. I think they'll have to use the UFO file because they're going to be going up against shit like JFK assassination stuff. They'll be going up against any kind of, Martin Luther King assassination stuff, all of this sort of thing, right? So that they'll have to drag down the news cycle to control it. And the only way and there are hints in the data, the only way I can see them doing that is through releasing something big like the UFO file. So they can't release information that the Khazarian Mafia, through Lyndon Johnson and through the cabinet and all of these people assassinated Kennedy, and that CIA actually did the deed. It doesn't aid the Khazarian Mafia for us to know that, even though that's factual and even though it's going to come out, they could use it to control the news cycle, but it's going to point back to them. So they're going to do something else. I don't see that they have many options left for the kind of narrative, what do I want to say, chatter control. There are very few things they can do that are going to be able to swing it back to them. I think the UFO stuff would do it for some period of time. Anyway, here now I got to start doing my other work, but it's going to be a very interesting few months. This will be the most spectacular fall, both weather-wise. It could be very cold and stormy, but also at an emotional level, as we see the deep state actually have the Khazarian Mafia control ripped away from the deep state. The Khazarian Mafia is out there flailing around, and the deep state's left to its own devices and decides to take some actions that in turn end up causing the Khazarians a whole lot of problems, and then we're off to the races on all of this. So anyway, guys, take care. I'll post these things here pretty quick, and then I'm getting back to my hunt for hidden space alien technology embedded in our humanities literary traditions and disguised, not deliberately, but disguised by being interpreted as religions. So I'm back on that. This is quite fascinating, and I'm learning a whole lot. So talk to you guys later.